All right, so today what we're working on is comparing and ordering rational numbers. Um, we've already compared and ordered integers before, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now what we're doing is we're going to be adding in, well, what's the difference between an integer and a rational number? Like, what makes this different? Yes.
The rational number has fractions and decimals.
Awesome. So what are integers, or what is an integer?
Negatives and positives.
Okay. So integers we were doing are negatives, are positives, and zero. Where rational numbers, you said that it has fractional parts, right? So basically, it's going to be the exact same concept as with integers, but the numbers aren't going to be as nice and pretty. Does that make sense? Okay. So just to review, you basically already defined it for me, but let's write it on here. It says, what is a rational number? So a rational number is going to be any number that can be written as a fraction. But I don't want to write fraction, I'm sorry. Any number that can be written as a ratio. And then in parentheses next to ratio, I want you to write fraction. Because a ratio, or a fraction, is basically a ratio. We get into ratios, I think it's in our second 6 weeks, we'll start getting into ratios. So y'all don't know fully what a ratio is, but we should have some understanding of that. Basically, a fraction that is a comparison of two numbers, so that's what a fraction is. Does that make sense? Awesome. So we have our number line here. Just to review, we have 0 right here in the middle. Any number, or the further I go left from 0, what's happening to that number?
Small.
Going down. It's getting smaller, or it's getting more negative. So the more negative, or the bigger the negative, the smaller it is. It's weird, right? It's like a play on words. So that's why we did smaller over here, all small. Now if I go to the right from 0, what's happening? Getting larger. Awesome. Okay, so we get that. Now, I'm going to put some numbers up here just so we can realize, because the fraction parts get kind of weird. So 1/2, where would it go on our number line? Dylan?
That way.
From 0? And is it going to go past 1, past 2, past 3? Where would it go?
Oh, I mean that way.
Well, you were right to say that it goes to the right, but where exactly?
To right to the
Is 1/2 bigger than 1?
1/2 bigger than 1. Oh no, it's smaller.
Awesome. So 1/2 is half of 1, right? So it's going to go in between. We still do it as a dot, and it would go in between 0 and 1. Do we agree?
Yes.
What if I did like negative 2.5? Yes.
That is between the 2 and 3.
Then right. So it's going to go in between the negative 2 and 3. So we're going to go to negative 2, and then I have to go in between negative 2 and 3. So that's going to be negative 2.5. We agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Make sure you write this down for me, please.
Oh, right.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that we could at least get that visually. So here's where we kind of have some helpful hints for ordering rational numbers. This is because it gets to where you kind of are doing a lot of conversions and a lot of math, and it's easy to get lost in it. So these are things that I've learned, or we have all learned, that just kind of help make it easier for you. So if you get confused on your homework at all, come back and review these because it helps you piece through it. So if we get confused, we can always use a number line like we have above. You can draw that really quickly and easily, and it just kind of helps you figure out where to place them. The second step is that if you're dealing with fractions, it says what might be helpful for you to consider doing. So I'm going to give us an example with 2 fractions. Let's say that we're trying to compare. Let's do 2/3 and 5/8. Because sometimes with our fractions, like if we have 1/4 and 1/2, is it kind of easy to tell which one's bigger?
Yes.
Right? Those are easy. Those are ones that you can kind of like logic and weigh out. But these, you're like, okay, well 2/3 is more than half of 3, and then 5/8 is more than half of 8, right? So they're both a little bit bigger than 1/2, but like which one's bigger? Because they're pretty close, right? So how can we compare those and like know for sure that our answer's right?
I don't know.
Jared?
By being able to.
Converting into a decimal.
Okay, so we can convert to a decimal. That's going to be our backup plan. Because that works, but sometimes it's not necessary. Sosa?
Another one.
A number line, but we have to know where to place small. Kind of confusing.
Same denominator.
Same denominators that you're going to say. Still thunder, sorry. Okay, so we can find common denominators. So in order to be able to compare them or put them in order, we need to find common denominators. I just put common denom. So what's a number that both 3 and 8 can go into cleanly?
What number?
3 and 8, my two denominators. So I heard Sosa just said 24. Do we agree? Yeah, I think that was smart. So how I'm going to do that is we're going to get the 2/3, and 3 times what gets you to 24?
3, 8.
Times 8, so we're going to get to 24. So whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. So we're going to get 16 over 24, right? Now let's do the 5/8. 8 times what gets you to 24?
3.
Times 3. So I'm going to do 5 times 3, and we get
15.
Thank you. So 5/8 is equivalent to 15 24ths, right? They're the same number. 2/3 is equivalent to 16 24ths. So which one's bigger? The 16 24ths or the 2/3, right? So do you see how finding that common denominator let us figure that out, or helped us figure that out?
Couldn't you just figure out like starting doing anything because it's like 2/3 is just one more into a whole. Okay.
Well, think about it. So the 2/3, let me draw a picture. If we have this and I cut it, let's say it's our pizza, because I love pizza. Okay, and we cut it into thirds. Okay, and I'm trying to compare that to the same size pizza, right? Cut into 8ths. It's kind of small. Okay, and I'm going to be coloring in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this one I'm coloring in 2. Do you see how those are really close? Like it's kind of hard to tell. And that's a sketch drawing, so it's kind of off. So it's like, because there is only one more, but that is like a bigger slice within these 3 are smaller pieces. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we have to get it, I think about getting my pizza, it has to be cut into the same amount of slices in order to be able to compare. That's finding that common denominator. Okay, and then I want us to just write side note, okay, like a star, backup plan.
That's not one of those plans that are supposed to be on the thing.
I know, is to convert to decimals. Now, that's all fun and dandy if we're dealing with just fractions, right? But what if we have a problem that has fractions and decimals in it? I'm giving you guys some time to see. What would we do? What could we do? I'm trying to compare a fraction and a decimal. They're in different forms. Jared?
You can make the fraction to a decimal.
Right, so, or, I love it. So Jared, while I was interrupting him, sorry, said that we can make the decimal into a fraction or the fraction into the decimal, right? Which basically, to sum that up, is that we need to get them
To the same kind
in the same form, right? So first step is to get them in the same, so step 1, get them into the same form. I guess I should say get the numbers into the same form. A lot of times you guys like to convert to decimals, like every single time. But sometimes if you're smart and kind of think ahead, sometimes if you look at and the denominators are easy to convert, sometimes it is easier to go to a fraction. It just depends. Okay, but usually it's decimals. Okay. Now our last step, number 4, is, in my opinion, the one that is super important and most people forget. So I want us to start it. Your answer must be written in its original form. So being really neat and keeping track of your conversions is super helpful and important. Okay, so I'm going to work through these next 2 examples with you guys and show you how I keep it organized, and that way you don't get lost and forget what you're solving for and just create chaos and you get confused. Okay, so do we have any questions before I move on? Okay. So, our first example, we're going to put the following set of numbers in order from least to greatest. What I do, because I write huge, I like to rewrite the numbers in my own handwriting. So I just write them in the same order. And -3 and 1 5. And then we say that we're going from least to greatest. So I always write my L to G. So which numbers am I going to be starting with first? Anybody?
No.
Oh. What numbers am I going to be starting with first? Well, hold on. No, am I just like in general? Which values?
Oh.
Yeah. The negatives, because negatives are smaller, right? So we're going to be going from least to greatest. So what I do is I just circle all of my numbers that have negatives in them. I want everyone doing this with me. And this helps you kind of hone in on certain ones, and then you can move on. Okay? Now, what do you think the next step I need to do is? Let's convert the fractions to a decimal, okay? And I also like to compare, so this was already a decimal. I'm going to write it over here. I like to compare my decimals vertically and line up my decimal point. So let's start with a -3 and 1/4. So I know it's going to be a -3. And how do I get the 1/4 to go to a decimal? Do we have that memorized?
No.
How many quarters are in a dollar?
4.
4. So if I have 1 out of the 4 quarters, how much change do I have?
75.
If I have 1 out of the 4 quarters,
Oh, yeah, right.
I have 1. So that's 25, right? So if you don't know that, we go over to the side and we'll do 1 divided by 4, right? And you're going to get 0.25. So I'm going to write I'm going to write -3 and 25 hundredths. See how I wrote it right below? I usually draw an arrow. I just don't have enough room here. And I keep them in lines. So I know that this is the same thing as that. Does that make sense? Okay? And I'm going to also write it down here. And then let's go to my other one. We have -3 and 1/5. How can I get 1/5 to a decimal? Here. By dividing. Could I also use my knowledge of place value? What could I do? Well, I say, can 5 go into 10? What would I multiply by? Times 2. So I'm going to do 1 times 2, and I'm going to get 2/10, right? If you don't, you need to be writing this down. Okay, so I get 2/10. So I'm going to write, if it's 2/10, that's going to be the same thing as -3, and then it's 0.2 or 2/10. See how some of them are easier to do this way? Again, the division always works. If that's confusing, the division always works. So then I'm going to write this here. We have our -3 and 2/10. Now to compare them, this is what's tricky. We're going from least to greatest, so I want to know what number is the smallest. It might help you to use your number line up at the top of the page. What number would be the smallest?
I'm saying a strategy, you could add zeros.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so we can add zeros here, just so that visually makes it easier in your head. I like that idea too. Okay, so how do I know which number is the smallest negative number? Yes. You can just say 3 and 2/10. Okay, so I get why you would think that, but we remember that they're negative.
Oh.
They trick you, right? So the larger the negative number, the further away it is from 0 to the left, so the smaller it is, right? Does that make sense? So what's the smallest number? Just say it out loud.
Negative 120.
Negative 330.
3.
Negative 3 and the 30. So negative 3.3. So I'm going to cross this out. And I check up here, and that's how it was in its original form, right, Dylan?
Right.
Okay. And now I'm going to cross it out from my original numbers. That way I know that I finished it, and I write that in my answer. Now let's go to our next number. What is our next number that's furthest to the left? Jared?
3.15.
Negative 3.25. So I cross it out. I find it up here, but its original form has a fraction in it. So I'm going to write my answer as negative 3 and 1/4.
What?
Did you see?
You go back to the decimal.
Yep. And do you see how it helped? Because I had, whenever I converted it to a decimal, I wrote it right below it so I knew which one it was and I wasn't all confused, right? Just helps you keep them, especially once the numbers will get closer. And then I only have one more negative left, so I know that this has to be the next smallest. I crossed it out. I find it up here, cross it out, and its original form is a fraction. So it's going to be negative 3 and 1/5. So now I finished with all of my negative values, right?
Yeah.
So now it's time to move on to the positive numbers.
Yeah.
So I have 3.18. I'm going to circle them in a different color so we can see them more. And 3 and 4/5. What do I need to do?
Convert.
Okay, so 3 and 4/5. I can convert that to a decimal. It's going to be 3 point. I think about the 4/5 again like this. If I have 4/5, I can find that denominator of 10, right? So 5 times what gets you to 10?
2.
Times 2, and then 4 times 2. So we get 8/10 or 8/10. Oops, it's a bad circle. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm gonna list them vertically so that I can compare. And I like that we said to add a 0. So which one is smaller? You can just say it. 3 and 18/100. Okay, so we have the 3 and 18/100, which is this. That's it in its original form. And then we have the 380 is all we have left, which is 3.8 or 3 and 4/5. Do you see all the steps though? It's kind of a lot. Sometimes the numbers you don't necessarily always have to convert them because sometimes I'll show you there might be numbers that like if they're like these are all we're doing and where they're really close so you do need to convert them. But sometimes there's numbers where like one will be a fraction and one will have a whole number, so the whole number is obviously bigger than the fraction. So sometimes you don't have to. You just have to think about it. Now this next one. Okay, we're supposed to order them from greatest to least, right? I'm gonna do just part of this one with you guys, and then you're gonna finish it on your own. We're putting them in order from greatest to least. So largest to smallest.
I got it.
I'm gonna rewrite them over here. So greatest to least, which numbers am I starting with? Kenzie, take it out of your binder for right now, and it'll be easier for you to write. There we go. So if I'm going from greatest to least, which numbers am I going to start with? Dylan?
The negative.
Are negatives greater?
I mean, positive.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to circle my positive numbers this time. What do I need to do?
Convert to decimal.
Convert it to a decimal. We have 4/5 here, right? How can I convert that? Times 2, is that what you said? Yep. So I could do times 2, and that will give me 8 over 10. So this is going to end up being 43 and 8/10, right?
Yeah.
So now if I'm going to be comparing 43 and 1800ths and 43 and 8/10, which one's larger?
That one. Top.
43 and 18
no,
hundredths.
Bottom 80.
Thank you. Can you say that again, Sosa?
80.
Right, so this is 8/10, but if I go to the hundredths place, it's 80 hundredths, right? And that's the same value, and this is only 18 hundredths.
Yes, it's the bottom.
So it's going to be 43.8, which is over here, and what its actual value is 43 and 4/5. So then I cross it out. And then because I only have one other positive number left, we know that's the next largest number, right? So that'll be 43.18. So I'm going to cross it out. And now I'm on to my negatives.
Negatives. Hey. Circle.
Circle them. So these are the ones that we're looking at. What do I need to do?
Convert the fractions to decimals.
Right. So I remember this is like negative 43. It's going to be point something. I'm like, I do not remember what 1/3 is as a decimal. And 3 can't go into something of 10. So what am I going to always resort to? Divide. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 3. Okay. Now can 3 go into 1? No. So I add my decimal point to 0, and I have to remember to bring my decimal up. 3 times 3 is 9. We subtract, and I have 1. I have to add my decimal. Add my 0, bring it down. So we should kind of be realizing that this is going to be the 3 for forever, right?
Yes. I got it.
Hold on. Hold on. Right. So, but what I want us to be sure to do. So it is the 3 with the line over it. But whenever we are lining them up to compare, these are the most missed questions on tests and quizzes. Okay? So what I want us to be sure to do whenever I'm lining them up to compare, so if I have the negative 43.33, and I'm comparing it to the negative 43, but this 3 with the bar over it, that 3 is repeating, right? So that means that it's like 3 for forever. So I go down the rows and I wait till I see where the difference is. So they're the same here, the same here, the same here, the same here. Now I have a 0 and a 3. Which one's bigger? The 3 is bigger, but they're negatives.
Yeah. So the top is big.
So this is actually the bigger number. It's the least negative number. Okay, so then that's going to be our next, the 43.33, and then we'll have the negative 43 and 1/3. Yes.
What number were you supposed to change on the homework?
Number 9.
Oh, the 300.
It should be 350. Yeah. Sorry, I made a note on the key and then I forgot to tell you guys.
And she came and told me, but I can't remember.
That's fine. You're welcome. All right. We have the remainder of class to work on these problems. Okay? I want us to be super focused because these problems do get difficult, but you have us here to help you, right? I want us doing this example. I want you to try this one on your own.